Have you ever noticed how your phone seems quieter these days? How you find yourself saying no to more invitations than you say yes to? If you're over 50, you probably felt that gentle pull towards solitude, and you might be wondering if something's wrong with you. Well, let me tell you something that might surprise you. Absolutely nothing is wrong. In fact, what you're experiencing is one of life's most natural progressions. And today I'm going to share 7 profound reasons why you start avoiding people as you age, and more importantly, why it's not just okay, but actually healthy. Welcome back to Wisdom for the Ages, where we explore life's deeper truths with a perspective that only comes from having lived them. I'm your host, and if you're finding value in these conversations about the realities of aging gracefully, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Today's topic is close to home for many of us who've reached that stage in life where we're more selective about who we spend our precious time with. Think of your social energy like a garden. When you're young, you plant seeds everywhere. Some grow into beautiful relationships. Others become weeds that drain your soil. As you age, you become a more experienced gardener. You know which plants deserve the best spots in your garden, and you're no longer afraid to pull the weeds. This is an antisocial behavior. It's wisdom in action. The first reason you start avoiding people as you age is what I call the depth over breadth revelation. Remember when you were younger and your address book was bursting with contacts? You collected friends like baseball cards, thinking quantity meant richness. But here's what decades of life teach you. A shallow well serves many people poorly, while a deep well serves fewer people exceptionally well. As we age, we begin to understand that meaningful connections require investment, real investment. Think of relationships like tending a fire. When you're young, you might try to keep 10 small fires burning at once, running between them with twigs and kindling. It's exhausting, and none of the fires ever get hot enough to really warm you. But as you mature, you realize it's better to tend 1 or 2 fires really well, feeding them with quality wood, nursing them into roaring flames that can actually heat your entire home. This shift isn't about becoming antisocial. It's about becoming intentional. You start recognizing that the friend who only calls when they need something isn't really a friend at all. You begin to see the difference between someone who asks, "How are you?" as a greeting, and someone who asks, "How are you?" because they genuinely want to know the answer. I remember a conversation with my neighbor Eleanor, who's 73. She told me, "I used to feel guilty about not returning every phone call or accepting every lunch invitation. Then I realized I was spending so much time maintaining shallow connections that I was neglecting the relationships that actually filled my soul." That's the depth over breadth revelation. Understanding that your emotional energy is finite and precious. The second reason is what I call the energy economics of aging. Your body has been your faithful companion for decades, but like a well-loved car that's taken you on countless journeys, it requires more careful maintenance and thoughtful use of resources. Think of your daily energy like a checking account. When you're 25, you might have $1,000 in energy to spend each day. You can afford to waste $200 on a toxic coworker's drama, $150 on a friend's repetitive complaints, and $100 on small talk at parties you don't really enjoy. You still have $550 left for what matters. But at 60 or 70, your daily energy account might only have $600 to spend. Suddenly, that $200 drain from toxic interactions isn't just annoying, it's a significant portion of your resources. You become more protective of your energy because you have to be. It's not selfishness, it's survival. This is like learning to budget after years of financial abundance. You start asking yourself, is this conversation, this social obligation, this gathering going to give me energy or drain it? And here's the beautiful part. You finally give yourself permission to choose interactions that refuel you rather than deplete you. My friend Robert, a retired teacher, explained it perfectly. "I spent 35 years giving my energy to everyone who needed it. Now I'm more selective. I'll still help people, but I choose how and when. If someone consistently leaves me feeling exhausted rather than enriched, I limit that exposure. It's not mean, it's necessary." The third reason you start avoiding people is your dramatically reduced tolerance for superficial interactions. After decades of life experience, you develop what I like to call authenticity radar, an almost supernatural ability to detect when someone is being genuine versus when they're just going through the social motions. Think of this like developing a refined palate for wine. When you first start drinking wine, anything tastes fine, even the cheap stuff from a box. But after years of tasting different wines, learning about regions and vintages, your palate becomes sophisticated. You can't unknow what good wine tastes like, and the cheap stuff becomes almost undrinkable. The same thing happens with conversations. When you're younger, you can tolerate hours of small talk about weather, traffic, or celebrity gossip. But after decades of real conversations about loss, love, dreams, fears, mortality, those surface-level interactions feel almost insulting to your intelligence and life experience. You find yourself mentally checking out when someone launches into their usual complaints about their commute, or when the conversation at a dinner party revolves around reality TV shows for the third time this month. It's not that you think you're better than these topics. It's that you know how precious time is, and you'd rather spend it on conversations that matter. This selectivity often gets misinterpreted as unfriendliness or superiority, but it's actually the opposite. You value human connection so much that you refuse to cheapen it with meaningless chatter. You'd rather have one conversation about someone's real hopes and struggles than 10 conversations about nothing at all. Which brings us to reason number 4, the acute awareness of time's precious nature. There's a mathematical reality that hits you somewhere in your 50s or 60s. You're fewer years ahead of you than behind you. This isn't morbid, it's clarifying. Imagine you have a beautiful antique vase that's been in your family for generations. When you're young, you might use it casually, not thinking much about its fragility or irreplaceable nature. But as you understand its true value and rarity, you become more careful about when and how you use it. You stop using it for everyday flowers and save it for truly special occasions. Time becomes that precious vase as you age. You stop spending it carelessly on obligations that don't align with your values or relationships that don't bring mutual joy and growth. You become fiercely protective of your weekends, your evenings, your holidays. Not because you're selfish, but because you finally understand they're not unlimited. This time consciousness makes you brutally honest about which relationships deserve your investment. The friend who chronically cancels plans, you stop making them. The family gatherings that leave everyone stressed and arguing, you give yourself permission to skip them. The social obligations you've been fulfilling out of guilt rather than joy, you let them go. I think about my Aunt Margaret, who at 68 told me, "I finally understand why my grandmother seemed so selective about her social commitments." She wasn't being difficult, she was being wise. At my age, every yes to something I don't value is a no to something I do. The 5th reason you start avoiding certain people is your accumulated wisdom about human nature. By the time you reach your later decades, you've seen the same patterns play out countless times. You can spot a manipulator from across the room, recognize emotional vampires within minutes of conversation, and identify fair-weather friends before they even prove themselves unreliable. This isn't cynicism, it's pattern recognition. It's like being an experienced meteorologist who can read subtle signs in the sky that others miss. You watched enough storms form to recognize the warning signs before the first raindrops fall. You've learned that some people are energy givers and others are energy takers, and that this rarely changes despite your best efforts to help or fix them. You've discovered that certain personality types will always create drama, always play the victim, or always make conversations about themselves. This knowledge doesn't make you bitter. It makes you selective. The beautiful thing about this wisdom is that it also helps you recognize and treasure the truly good people in your life. You can spot genuine kindness, authentic vulnerability, and real emotional intelligence because you've seen their counterfeits so many times. You become incredibly grateful for the people who consistently show up with honesty, respect, and mutual care. Reason 6 is the natural evolution of your interests and priorities. The things that excited you at 30 might bore you at 60, and the people you used to enjoy might no longer share your current passions and concerns. Think of this like outgrowing clothes. The outfit that looked perfect on you 20 years ago might not fit your current body or lifestyle. This doesn't mean the outfit was bad or that your old body was wrong. You've simply changed, and your needs have evolved. Maybe you discovered a love for gardening, reading philosophy, or volunteering for causes close to your heart. Perhaps you're drawn to deeper spiritual practices or have developed interest in history, or nature that weren't important to you when you were focused on career advancement and raising children. Your old social circle might not share these new passions, and that's perfectly natural. I think about my friend Susan, who spent her 30s and 40s as the life of every party, organizing happy hours, planning elaborate dinner parties, always surrounded by crowds. But after her retirement, she discovered watercolor painting and meditation. She found herself drawn to quiet mornings in her studio and peaceful afternoons in nature. The friends who once shared her love of nightlife couldn't understand her new interests, and gradually, the invitations stopped coming. I thought I'd lost my friends, Susan told me, but I realized I'd found myself. This evolution isn't a loss. It's growth. You're not becoming antisocial. You're becoming more selective about experiences that align with your authentic self. The tragedy isn't that you no longer enjoy what you once enjoyed. The tragedy will be continuing to pretend you do just to maintain connections that no longer serve you. The seventh and perhaps most profound reason you start avoiding people as you age is that you finally made peace with solitude. This might be the biggest shift of all, because Western culture teaches us that being alone means being lonely, that solitude equals sadness. But here's what decades of living teach you. There's a monumental difference between being alone and being lonely. Think of solitude like learning to appreciate fine art. When you're young, you might feel uncomfortable in an art museum. The quiet feels awkward, the slow pace feels boring. You want to rush through with friends, talking and joking to fill the silence. But as you mature, you begin to understand that some of life's greatest treasures can only be appreciated in stillness. You learn to sit with a painting for 20 minutes, letting its beauty unfold slowly. The silence becomes sacred rather than scary. The same transformation happens with being alone. Somewhere along the way, you discover that your own company is actually quite pleasant. You can have entire conversations with yourself that are more interesting than most social interactions. You can pursue thoughts to their natural conclusion without interruption. You can feel emotions fully without having to explain or justify them to anyone else. This comfort with solitude fundamentally changes how you approach social situations. You no longer say yes to invitations out of fear of being alone. You don't cling to relationships that have run their course just to avoid solitude. You don't fill every moment with social media or phone calls to escape your own thoughts. Instead, you curate your social time like a museum curator, selecting only the pieces that truly enhance the gallery of your life. My neighbor Frank, who's 71, put it beautifully. I used to think people who enjoyed being alone were sad or damaged. Now I realize they were just comfortable with themselves in a way I hadn't learned yet. Learning to enjoy my own company was like making friends with the one person I'll spend my entire life with myself. This doesn't mean becoming a hermit or pushing away all human connection. It means approaching relationships from a place of wholeness rather than need. You engage with others because you want to, not because you're afraid to be alone. You contribute to conversations because you have something meaningful to add, not because silence makes you uncomfortable. What's really happening when we start avoiding people as we age goes deeper than simple preference changes. It's about finally understanding the difference between connection and attachment, between solitude and loneliness, between being selective and being antisocial. Throughout our younger years, we often mistake quantity for quality in relationships. We measure our social success by how busy our calendars are, how many people we know, how often our phones ring. But this is like judging a meal by how many courses is rather than how nourishing and delicious each course is. As we age, we begin to understand what psychologists call socio-emotional selectivity. This isn't a fancy term for being antisocial. It's a recognized psychological theory that explains how our social goals change as we become more aware of time's limitations. When time feels infinite, we prioritize meeting new people and gathering information. But when we recognize time's constraints, we prioritize emotionally meaningful experiences. Think of it like this. If you were planning your dream vacation and had unlimited time and money, you might try to see everything. Every museum, every restaurant, every landmark. But if you only had a weekend and limited resources, you'd carefully choose the experiences that matter most to you. That's exactly what happens with social relationships as we age. We also develop what I call emotional literacy. the ability to read the true emotional cost and benefit of different relationships. Just like learning to read helped you distinguish between valuable books and mindless entertainment, emotional literacy helps you distinguish between relationships that enrich your life and those that drain it. Now, let's address the elephant in the room, the guilt and shame many of us feel about becoming more selective socially. You might worry that you're becoming a grumpy old person, that you're disappointing others, or that you're missing out on life by saying no more often. Here's what I want you to understand. Feeling guilty about protecting your energy and time is like feeling guilty about locking your front door at night. It's not mean-spirited. It's sensible. You wouldn't leave your home or life, literally. Every hour you spend in a draining conversation or toxic relationship is an hour you can't spend on something that brings you joy, growth, or peace. The shame often comes from internalized messages we received when we were younger, that being social is always good, that avoiding people is always bad, that popularity equals happiness. But these black and white rules don't account for the complexity of real life and mature relationships. I remember talking to a woman named Dorothy at my local coffee shop. She was 67 and had recently stopped attending her book club after 20 years. I felt so guilty, she said, like I was letting everyone down. But the truth was, it had become a gossip session instead of discussion about books. I was driving an hour each way to sit through 2 hours of complaints and negativity. When I calculated that I was spending 5 hours a week on something that consistently made me feel worse, the decision became clear. Dorothy's story illustrates something crucial. The guilt we feel about setting boundaries often disappears when we honestly examine the cost-benefit ratio of our social commitments. When you stop avoiding people out of social obligation and start choosing relationships based on genuine connection, something magical happens. Your remaining relationships become exponentially more meaningful and satisfying. It's like the difference between a garden where you try to grow everything and a garden where you carefully select plants that thrive in your specific soil and climate. The focus garden doesn't have as many varieties, but each plant is healthier, more beautiful, and brings more joy. When you're no longer spreading your emotional energy thin across dozens of superficial connections, you can invest deeply in relationships that truly matter. You can be fully present in conversations because you're not mentally counting down the minutes until you can leave. You can offer genuine support to friends because you're not already depleted from a dozen other social obligations. This selectivity actually makes you a better friend, family member, and community member. When someone gets your time and attention, they're getting the best version of you, not the exhausted, overwhelmed person who says yes to everything. Think about the people in your life who seem to have that rare quality of being fully present when they're with you. They probably aren't the people who know everyone in town or attend every social event. They're likely the ones who choose their social commitments carefully and show up wholeheartedly to the ones they choose. So, how do you navigate this natural evolution towards selectivity without burning bridges or hurting feelings? Here are some practical approaches that honor both your needs and your existing relationships. First, practice the art of the graceful decline. You don't need to provide elaborate excuses or justify your choices. A simple, "Thank you for thinking of me, but I won't be able to make it," is sufficient. If pressed for reasons, you can say, "I'm being more selective about my commitments these days to make sure I can be fully present for the ones I choose." Second, be honest about your changing needs with the people who matter most. If you have a close friend who's hurt by your decreased availability, have a conversation about how your social needs are evolving. Most people who truly care about you will understand and adjust their expectations. Third, don't mistake selectivity for superiority. The goal isn't to judge others for their social choices, but to honor your own. Someone else might thrive in large groups and frequent social activities. That's wonderful for them. Your path might be different, and that's equally valid. As we conclude today's exploration of why we naturally start avoiding people as we age, I want to leave you with this thought. Becoming more selective about your social energy isn't a sign of aging poorly. It's a sign of aging wisely. You've spent decades learning about yourself, about relationships, about what truly matters in life. You've earned the right to apply that wisdom to how you spend your precious time and energy. You don't owe anyone your presence just because they want it. And you don't need to justify choosing quality over quantity in your relationships. Remember, The goal isn't to become isolated or bitter, but to become intentional and authentic. Some of the loneliest people I know are surrounded by others constantly, while some of the most content people I know have smaller but deeper social circles. If this video has resonated with you, please give a thumbs up and share it with someone who might benefit from permission to be more selective in their social choices. Subscribe to Wisdom for the Ages for more honest conversations about the realities and gifts of growing older with intention and authenticity. And remember, choosing your companions as carefully as you choose your books, your food, or your entertainment isn't antisocial. It's wise. Until next time, be kind to yourself and honor your need for meaningful connection over empty socializing.